Bryant, Extension Agent, Lawrence County. And I want to thank Matt for coming up with the idea and doing most of the work on setting up these lunch series webinars. We've had a couple pretty good ones, so I don't know about this one, but today what I'm on a visit with folks about is a demonstration we did a few years ago here in Lawrence County where we were looking at reduced stress weaning methods in beef calves. The 15 slides, this probably ain't going to take a whole very long to kind of go through, but kind of the main points we're going to look at is first of all, kind of talk about some of the reasons why people might want to consider weaning their calves on their farm and precondition them, as opposed to some of the reasons why folks don't do that. Then kind of get into the specifics of the different weaning methods if someone decides that they might want to try to wean calves at home and do some preconditioning, maybe for some added value. And then kind of go through the demonstration itself, how it was set up, what we did, the results, and then kind of get into the economics of it, because it's all about whether or not this has a chance of adding some value and making producers some money. So that's kind of what we're going to do. Someone's got a question, fire off at any time when we go through this. And with that, we'll go ahead and get into it. Tennessee, especially this southern Middle Tennessee area, is a pretty major beef cattle area. And in general, our folks are cow-calf producers. We've got a few that like to stock their calves, but in general, most of our guys and gals are cow-calf producers. And in general, most calves are weaned on a trailer on the way to the livestock market, the weekly livestock market. And there's a lot of reasons why producers have done that over the years. And some of these reasons we've got up here, folks probably have heard different ones, but probably some of the most common ones is that they have the belief, those producers are, that weaning those calves at home is going to reduce their income. And some of the reasons why they feel that way is, of course, when you wean a calf, that's pretty stressful, and they have a perception that calf, when they sell it after they've weaned it on their farm for a while, that it's actually going to lose weight, and certainly not gain enough weight to justify, the time and the effort that they put into weaning them on the farm. One of the reasons that I've heard over and over is they're scared that keeping those calves around just increases the chances of those calves getting sick and maybe even losing one every now and then. Certainly, if you lose a calf after you kept it where you could have marketed it straight off the farm, it's certainly going to take a while to recoup that loss. But with some strategic management strategies, that I think can be put at a minimum. Another reason is lack of facilities. Folks just have used the excuse that they just don't have the fencing, they don't have the facilities, they don't have the room to actually effectively wean these calves on the farm. Now, with the Tennessee Ag Enhancement Program, we are in much better shape in 2020 than we were before the state decided to cost share on improving handling facilities and covering those handling facilities. So that is actually a point that's probably less of an issue now than it used to be, but it still is an issue. And folks, folks look at that as a reason why, or excuse why they don't want to wean calves at home. And the last two there, just they don't want to invest the time, the money, the resources, and the main thing is the labor that goes into preconditioning these calves, because it does take time, it does take some effort, some planning, it does take some added money and resources, and certainly does take a lot of labor. So those are some of the common reasons, and there's probably more, but those are some of the most common ones. Now, as we move to the pros and some of the reasons why and certainly some of the reasons, if you haven't, or your producers haven't thought about weaning their calves, here's some added benefit of that possibility. And in general, when folks wean calves and precondition them, they're going to do that for a minimum of 45 days. In many cases, they'll try to stretch that out to 60 days or more for a time to enable them to get the benefit out of an actual preconditioning program. Certainly, one of the biggest assets of weaning calves at home is going to be, you're going to be able to hopefully sell more pounds if it's done right. Certainly, possibly quite a few more pounds, and pounds equals dollars in many cases. And one of the things with being able to precondition calves at home is that makes those calves more desirable to some buyers in terms of trying to get those marketed in a value added or some type of group marketing event like a feeder calf sale, or in our part of the world, we have used to be the Giles Beef Alliance, now it's the Tennessee Beef Alliance. If you're big enough and can put a group of calves together that are fitting a tractor, trailer, truck load, we have the Lower Middle Tennessee Cattlemen's Association video board sale. And these all, and many times require a preconditioning program in hopes that those calves are going to be able to garner a little bit of added incentive over what they might have sold at the weekly auction market. Another positive is after these calves are preconditioned, they've been weaned on your farm. They went through stress, or some stress is going to be involved with it, regardless of the form of weaning. Some methods are lots more stressful than others, but that gets reduced tremendously. And with reduced stress, we get reduced shrink, as opposed to if we take them directly off the mama and wean them bawling and squalling all the way to the barn while they're there. They're gonna shrink a lot, and that gets in the pocketbook pretty quick. So the reduced shrink's an added benefit. And then certainly we would hope that if we go to all this trouble, that there's going to be a real good potential for a net gain after we've taken off whatever we spent in cost of preconditioning these calves. So, and certainly minimizing stress. So those are some of the reasons why that, I think it's something that producers to consider if they hadn't already considered weaning these calves off the farm, because this day and time, especially in today's market, with the market going like it is, kind of on the downward twirl, it's more important now than it's ever been to try to gain some value on these calves. Okay, so all right, so as we get into jumped ahead of me there. So as we get into looking at what we actually did here in the county and some weaning methods, the two things that are most important if the producers are considering weaning calves and preconditioning calves is, number one, they need to have those calves accustomed to getting to feed and eating some type of feed prior to weaning. And their suggestion is at least 2 weeks before weaning. And that would be like the picture you see there with the calves being able to go into a creek feeder where the mama cows can't get into, maybe an area where the calves can get through the mamas can't get to for some more lush pasture, or get to a feeder in that shape, form, or fashion. That's very critical, because they need to already be knowing how to eat and where to eat and do all those things before we actually pull the trigger and wean them from their moms. And then the two methods that the research has kind of shown that effectively will reduce the stress from the time that calf's weaned is either using a fence line weaning method, or like the picture on the right kind of shows, use some type of weaner to put in the calf and wean him right beside his mom. So those are kind of key factors that producers need to think about when they're looking at weaning calves at home. So for our demonstration, and the family that did this is the Gamble family, or Five Oaks Cattle Farm down in the south end of the county. They had already been utilizing fence line weaning whenever we talked about doing this demonstration, and plastic weaners were something they had thought about doing but hadn't done yet, and they wanted to do that and compare. So we actually had 3 different methods that we had them do on their farm. Group where we used the most common method, in this part of the world is take the mama or take the calves totally away from their mothers where they can't see them, they can't hear them. The theory, I know when my grandfather had cattle, we tried to carry them off. His theory was as far away as they possibly could so the mamas couldn't hear the calves bawling, because he was afraid that they were going to get out if they could hear them. So this has kind of been a kind of reverse in theory here. With fence line weaning, you're actually trying to wean them right there beside the mom. And of course, the plastic weaners, you're weaning them in the same field as the mom, versus the total separation is where they're weaned at a distance. So this is Marty. He picture him of actually putting the plastic weaner in the nose of the calf, and I got one here to give you a little bit closer look at. These are sold and been sold a while. There's a lot of different variations to these weaners, but they're plastic, and they're actually, all you do is just take your fingers and separate the part that goes into the nose, and you just slip that into the nose, and it's very, very easily done. And these things are pretty inexpensive. They'll run somewhere around $2.50 to $3 a piece. Sometimes we have found when putting these in that it can kind of get some sharp edges around this point where they go in the nose, and you might want to keep a little bit of lube close by the chute to prevent that from scratching the nose and making it kind of sore. But that's all they are. I've seen some different types of these. It's got the spikes on them. Some of them look like an alien's mask, but this is what that's designed to do, is to prevent that calf. I'll show you a little closer picture here. When that calf reaches up to nurse the udder, that flap just is supposed to keep it from being able to get its mouth on the teat. Now, I will say that through the years that the Gambles have been doing this, and certainly during the year of our demonstration where we were watching and keeping records, there'll be a calf every now and then that will figure out how to flap that thing up on top of his nose and still be able to nurse. Typically, there'll be a calf or two out of a big group, maybe 5% or less, that will lose that weaner. So you have that factor to consider. Maybe 5% or so of animals will figure out either how to nurse or will lose that weaner. But you got to deal with that issue. But the Gambles have saved these things from year to year. They'll take them out, clean them up, and they get multiple years use out of these things. So they're really, really easy to put in and easy to use. There's a shot of some of their calves beside some of their cows. Bigger group of calves that we actually had in the group that was looked at with the weaners in their noses as the main method of weaning. So White Wean, I think, is a company that sells this particular type, but there's lots of other good ones on the market. The other reduced stress weaning method that they had already been doing and we wanted to look at again was the fence line weaning method. And this is where you basically at weaning time just move the cows, preferably versus the calves. You can move the calves in the alternate pasture, but you would like to keep the calves in the same pasture where they were accustomed to going to the creek and eating, and move the cows next door. Here, some of the keys is that fence has to be an adequate structured enough where the calves can't nurse through the fence. But the theory here is, calves are weaned there beside mom. They can see her, they can smell her, they can hear her, and it's just this is proven to be a lot less stressful than total separation. So those are the main methods that the Gambles looked at. A little background on the management of these calves to give you all some idea of how they were managed. Now the calves had all been accustomed to creep feed. The Gambles were feeding soy hulls, and they started that well before 2 weeks before weaning. I think it was somewhere between 6 and 8 weeks, depending on the age of the calf. So they had been exposed to creep feed for quite some time. They knew where the feed was. They knew how to eat, and they were eating really, really good whenever these calves were actually weaned. When they were weaned, they were switched off to a co-op 13% really, really high fiber feed, and they were getting somewhere between 8 and 10 pounds of feed each day. And Mr. Jerry was feeding them in the morning, half of that, and feeding the other half in the afternoon. And all the groups got this same, they were treated the same way. So they were not lacking in nutrition. Now, if you're looking at doing this and maybe wanted to get by on a little cheaper feed, you certainly could do that. But this is how they decided to do it, because they were pushing game. Okay, so to get into the actual demonstration, the guts of it, the Gambles actually worked all their calves, about 3 or 4 weeks before weaning, where they got them up. They always do this to give them their primary vaccination shot, their first shots. And then they came back on weaning date and give their second round. So they were going to be getting them up anyway when we got them up to wean them. And the group that we used the weaners with, that is the point where the weaners were put into calves, noses, this middle group right here. And this was the weight of all the calves. Now, they typically ran mostly Angus bulls, but at that point in time, they had one horn Hereford bull, and they had several calves from that bull. And their idea was, we actually down here at the bottom with the groups that we totally separated, the calves that had horns, they dehorn them at weaning. So we decided to actually look at those and compare the ones that didn't have to be dehorned to those that were dehorned, and knowing that that's an added stress on top of the weaning. And we actually had those in two different groups in comparison. Then 7 days after they were weaned, we came back and got all the calves up again. Now, this is probably the one time where the calves had to be gotten up where they normally probably wouldn't have to be gotten up with the weaners, because the primary objective was, in addition to weighing, so we could have some baseline of what happened the first week after weaning. We also took the weaners out of the group, because they suggest with these weaners that they're left in somewhere between at least 4 or 5 days, but ideally you need to leave them in 7 days for the calf to get adequately weaned. So looking at the results from that first week, these 3 top groups that were all weaned with either fence line or the weaners, which we would consider reduced stress weaning methods, if you look over here, that those groups gained over 3 pounds a day. And that's basically, you assume that's pretty darn good with that ration, certainly. So that gives you some idea that that weaning event did not stress them to the point where they didn't continue eating, versus the bottom 2 groups down here that were totally separated from their mothers. They actually lost weight. Both groups lost about 2 pounds per day. with the group that actually had were dehorned, they all lost a little bit more weight than the group that was not dehorned. So another thing that Mr. Gamble did, and I don't have a chart to show, but he kept up with the times that the calves were balling, walking the fence, and doing those sorts of things, which indicates that those animals are under some sort of stress. And remembering from some of his figures, the groups down here that were, that were totally separated, they were constantly walking the fence, bawling, which means they were worried about mom, trying to find mom, and they were not eating and were not gaining. Then the Gamble's program was to do this for around 60 days. So we came back in 58 days and we weighed all the calves again. And the overall weight gain for the three groups that were weaned with reduced stress weaning methods, they continued on with that gain of about 3 pounds a day. Now, the totally separated group actually started gaining weight after that initial week or two of losing weight. They actually overcame and they started gaining weight. They never were able to catch the groups that were weaned by reduced stress weaning methods, either with the fence line or with the weaners, but they did in fact continue to gain. So the last thing is kind of putting some economics to this. Now I toyed around yesterday with putting today's market prices in here, and it was so all over the board. The market is just going nuts right now. I decided to just stick with, I think I last updated this last fall when I presented this to Master Beef Producer program. So what we did was we looked at the value of the calves if they had been sold, and this is based on prices during that time at the weekly auction market. For those 575 average weight calves, were bringing that particular week almost $1.50. And then looking out 60 days later, and looking at the weight gain, this is the group that were either fence line weaned or were weaned with weaners in their nose. Looking at their weight gain and what their value was 60 days later, and that was $1.32. So we actually subtracted that ending value from the beginning value, and those calves in this particular scenario were going to bring about $130 more than if they were sold all straight off the mama. Then looking at the inputs cost, knowing that they were getting about 10 pounds a day for 58 days, the Gambles were feeding at that time, the price of that feed was about $215 a ton. So we put that value of $62 in feed for each calf, plus the whatever it cost for the vaccines, dewormers, and all that was about $12, and added those and subtracted that from 130. So the net return over all the input cost was about $56 per calf for that 58 days. And then we did the same thing for the total separation group, and of course they didn't gain hardly as much. So that shows here, and they had the same amount of inputs subtracted from that. So they only netted about $35 a calf. So they actually, it paid to do the total separation, but it actually paid you more if you pondered and used some of these reduced stress weaning methods. And then the final slide, kind of to summarize this, is that whether the calves were fence line weaned or the group that was weaned with plastic weaners, they outgained the groups that were totally separated by between 35 and 55 pounds over that 58-day period. And kind of the totally separated group gained average 2.1 pounds per day, where the calves that were weaned with reduced stress weaning methods gained about 3 pounds a day. They say that in a cow's life, the most stressful times are the day she's born, the day she's weaned, and then the day she has her first calf. So whatever we can do to try to reduce that stress, if we're going to think about weaning at home, and I think this demonstration proves that, if we either fence line wean or use these weaners can benefit producers greatly, and maybe make the difference between whether or not they want to try this in the future or they want to continue weaning those calves straight off the mama on the trailer headed to the stock barn. So I'll stop right there and see if there's any questions.
There's not any questions right now, Calvin, in the chat box, but maybe somebody else has got one. I got a question for Calvin.
Calvin.
Yes.
Yeah, you know what? Another thing with this too is for people that are going to say background even further, maybe for 90 or 120 days, that's where the real big difference comes into play also, as far as having either the fence line feeding or just having those weaners in place. You know, the value that really comes through the longer that you have those cattle in your system.
That's right. And the figures I showed here, I'm going to tell you, playing around yesterday, I was looking at some sales. If you are actually going to take the benefit, and this was comparing apples to apples, but most of the time, these calves that have been preconditioned are going to be sold, unless you could probably talk to this more than I can, either maybe at an alliance sale or video board sale or the minimum of a graded sale. They're on average going to benefit maybe a 2, 3, maybe even 5, 6, 7 cents premium, which is not shown right here. But if you add a nickel to that, that's going to really increase the net return down here. And these calves are just more marketable. There's more buyers looking for a group that they know has been vaccinated. They know how to eat out of a feed trough. They know how to eat out of a watering system, and they know they've already went through the limited stress or stress of being weaned, and they're just going to give more for them. And that's not seen right here. We're just these numbers are comparing weekly auction market values. So you're exactly right.
Calvin, you can probably add about $12 a hundredweight on those calves if you sold them in the alliance, because that's what the average has been over the last 18 years or however long they've been doing that.
Right. Yeah, and yesterday, if I would have did this, I actually saw some graded sales that these 7 weights were bringing more than these 575 weights on the weekly auction market this week. We're looking at, $1.20, $1.25 for some of these, and I saw some graded sales where these 7 weights were bringing $1.25 or more. So they actually were bringing more per pound.
Well, on that 705-pound calf there you got, of course, you're looking at total separation, but that's still about $85 calf. So you can figure if they weigh more, they're going to bring more. So it's worth looking into alliance on something like this.
Well, after we finished this demonstration, the Gambles have been one of the biggest promoters of these weaners, and a lot of producers in the Loretta area now are using these weaners and love them. Any other questions? That's all I got, unless anybody else has any questions.
Hey, Calvin, it's Roger.
Yeah.
Have you guys ever done any factoring into the payback time it takes to pay back the plastic weaners that you use for them calves to show the producer that, in 2 or 3 years you make your money back on your initial investment?
These things only cost about $3 a pop. If you can get, 2 or 3 years out of them, you're looking at $1, maybe $1 a piece out of them. And if that's your cost, you know, this total separated group's made you $34. So you've already recuperated that plus 30 some odd dollars. So that this is very inexpensive. The one thing that wasn't factored in here was actual time and labor. You know, it did take time to do all this and take some labor. Producer could have been doing something else with his time. So that was not a factor in taking out of this. But,
However, if you're running through the chute
Yeah.
anyway, just putting that weaner in is really nothing more.
well, that's all I got.
All right. Thank you, Calvin. Done a good job. I'm going to stop recording and I'll get it posted to YouTube website here pretty quick.